Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Becoming Solely podcast. On this podcast, we are dedicated to sharing honest and real stories about healing, the journey, spirituality, awakening moments, and ultimately what it means and what that process looks like to becoming your most authentic self. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Anna Dapelo Garcia, and she is a Mexican American. She was born and raised in East San Jose, California. She's passionate about making a difference for current and also the future generation of Latinas. Ana is really, an advocate for equal pay, preparing Latinas for success in the workplace. And she's been recognized a lot, y'all. She has received many awards. I'll name a few. Silicon Valley Business Journal Woman Influence Award, Woman of the Year by the Women Healthcare Executives, and also recognized as National Diversity by the National Diversity Council as a top Latino leader. And she's been featured on Forbes, National Public Radio, New York Times for her amazing, amazing work, as you see, with Lean In Latinas. So she is the founder of Lean In Latinas. It's a nonprofit organization to help advance Latinas to achieve gender equity. That's ultimately how we got connected. So I saw on LinkedIn that you were the founder of Lean In Latinas. I've been looking for a community as I've been going through my personal journey in life as a young Latina professional. And you just were so open to speaking to me, scheduling that call. And I think from the moment we had our call, I was like, wow, you are a very solid soul and human being. So thank you so much for being on my podcast. I feel super, super privileged and excited to have you here today. Tell me a bit about your personal journey in the most authentic way possible as an executive leader and founder and also well-respected individual. I'd love to know how have you gotten to this point if you want to share. I know it's a big,
Yeah.
big story. But I'd love to know some of those pivotal experiences and moments that has gotten you to where you are today.
Yeah, I love that question. And I think about several points in my life. I think about the time that I was sitting at a bus stop in East San Jose. I think I was around 12 or 13 and feeling really lost and feeling like, what's out there in the world? And why am I here? And I want to make a difference and not really knowing how to do that. And, and growing up in a bad neighborhood and not having any role models, not seeing Latinas that I'd want to aspire to be, and feeling really frustrated with that and not really sure what to make out of that. Um, and just feeling like I didn't know what my purpose was. And so, when I got into my 20s, I was jumping from job to job. And it wasn't until my late 20s that I got a job at a very big academic medical center. And one of the first things that my parents said to me when I got the job, they said, Anna, whatever you do, keep your head down, don't cause any trouble. You're lucky to have that job. That was fairly young. I was in my late 20s. And the problem with saying that to me, even though it was well intended, is that it silenced my voice. And unfortunately, it made me feel inferior because I was going into an environment where I was definitely in the minority. And I'm talking about almost 35 years ago. So you can only imagine. And so I spent many years not realizing how unprepared I was to be in the business environment. I had never heard the word college growing up. So I didn't have that behind me. And in fact, I was hiding the fact that I was a high school dropout. I
Wow.
was in an environment where I was surrounded by people who were, masters prepared, PhDs, but I had hustle and I was street smart and I was hungry. And, but yeah, so I think my whole career journey, has been sort of these different chapters. But what I didn't realize until about 10 years ago, around that time, but I didn't realize that I was also going through a journey of identity. So even though I was climbing the ladder, I became the first Latina executive director at my place of employment. I didn't quite realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm coming into my own as well.
Mm,
So there's a lot in there.
yeah. We'll definitely keep
Yeah,
getting.
there's a lot in that story, but I'm happy to share that with you.
Yeah, you created such a vivid story just now of you at the bus stop just thinking, and I think a lot of us go through those pivotal moments where you start questioning and wondering, what is purpose? What am I doing here on this beautiful planet and earth that we have? And when you're sharing, I think a lot about how there is parallel, and I can relate to you in that as well, being first generation, not hearing the word college,
Mhm.
get a good job, kind of stay in order. And I think for me it was really hard. And I didn't, similar to you, I haven't seen, when I was growing up, I didn't see anyone that looked like me getting the master's degree, going to college, doing all of that. So navigating that space can definitely be tough. And that leads me to wanting to know more about, what type of healing work do you feel like you've had to go through in this unraveling process, like really healing and facing the different parts of yourself to be in this type of world where it's like corporate heavy, but then also having this other aspect to you where it's real life.
Yeah.
You come from, a different background. So what was the healing that you kind of went through? What was that process like?
Well, I'm really happy to see that in today's world, there's a lot more acceptance around therapist, as an example. I have friends who say, "Oh, I can't meet on Wednesday because I'm seeing my therapist." Well,
Love that.
and it's just so normal. But when I was growing up, not only was that something you didn't really hear about, but it was definitely not something that you just did. So, in my 20s and 30s, healing was, you know, um, coming up with my own ways of doing that, whether that was healing by shopping, doing that, um, talking to a close friend. But I've come to appreciate, because I am in healthcare, that, you can have friends and that might listen to you and help you, but it makes a world of difference if you go to people who are qualified to do that, who
Mm,
can really help you dig deeper. But, healing means different things to different people. For some people, it could be, I need to exercise. That's part of my healing. I need to do yoga. I need to, spend time with my familia, or I need to have me time.
yeah.
So I think for me, I didn't recognize until maybe 10 years ago or so that I did need to address, issues that I had experienced as a child. I grew up between two people who had a terrible marriage.
Mm,
And, you know, when you experience that kind of stuff for as long as I did, it shapes who you are, and sometimes not in the best ways, you know. And I noticed that, even as I got into dating, that not only was I not prepared to work well in a job, I wasn't prepared to be effective in a relationship because I was carrying a lot of stuff. So I think, healing for me these days is, when I feel like I do need somebody that's qualified that I need to talk to, I'm going to do that. And I'm actually going to suggest that people do it,
yes.
because I feel I've become educated with that. Or when I feel like I'm doing too much, to slow down a little bit, um, and actually it's not just physicality, it's, giving yourself grace. And sometimes, I found when I was younger, I was more harder on myself, and now that I'm older, it's sort of like, oh, it's not the end of the world. We all make mistakes. Don't dwell on that. Move forward. And as humans, we're just prone to making mistakes. But I think part of healing is part of forgiving. And I had a very difficult relationship with my father, and for many, many years. And he died about 2.5, 3 years ago almost. And I had a decision he was in hospice actually. And I had to make a decision that I was going to forgive him, that I needed to forgive him. I needed to do that. And by choosing to forgive him, that became healing for me.
Mm.
And so I made that decision. I was with him actually the day that he did pass away. And it felt good that I released the anger, the frustration, the feeling of abandonment, all of these feelings that I had by just simply forgiving was part of the healing process between me and him. And I'm so glad that I did that because I was stubborn for decades. I was stubborn. And in fact, that really didn't get me anywhere.
Mm.
And so I think for me, healing, a lot of it is around forgiveness.
Wow. Yeah, that's really, really powerful. When you're speaking, I feel like you're kind of like speaking to me here. I'm like, hold on. I can relate in, having a difficult relationship with my father as well. So I'm definitely gonna take some of those words of wisdom and experiences to my heart, you mentioning that. And, I think these types of conversations about healing and like unraveling the deepest parts of us, I want to know, how could we try to incorporate this with also finding, what our career is. I think we separate a lot of this where it's like, yeah, it's personal life and you do the healing work on your personal time, but these types of conversations almost are a little bit shied away from. And I know you do diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So I'd love to know, how could we integrate the two in having these types of conversations, and what would a world look like if we did?
Well, it people would have to be willing to be vulnerable.
Mm.
And, you know, we are many times different in who we are at work, who we are outside of work. Sometimes I'll find like, oh, I'm going to listen more here at work. And then at home, I'm like, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
So, the workplace is a very interesting environment. You want to show your best, you want to make the best presentation, you want to have the best, most people want to have the best interactions at work. Um, but who we are as individuals, all of that comes in through the door, even if you don't see it, right?
Yes.
And I was a manager for a long time, and I would always find it interesting that some managers would say, okay, everybody just get along, and well, it's not that easy, right? Because you let's take a room of 10 people. Each one of those people had a completely different experience growing up. In some families, they all sat around and said, well, what do you think? And what do you think? That's not my home life. My home life was yelling, violence, slamming doors. I didn't know anything different. So that all comes to the workplace and who we are as individuals. But it's scary you hear that saying, bring your whole self to work. That scares people. That some people aren't safe, don't feel safe with that. And some people don't want to do that. I think that I think keeping your expectations as realistic as possible. Even in DEI work, Some people want to talk about race issues, discrimination issues, underrepresentation issues. Some people are saying, I just want to come to work, do my job, and leave. And so you have to have some level of respect to individual preference. Um, and, if for those people that want to lean in more to who they are and share that space with you, I think that's great. But I think at the same time, is respecting those that really aren't comfortable in doing that. They just have no interest in doing that. And I think, there's parts of me that that I don't actively talk about out there in the universe. So I think, I think we as humans, I think we share pieces of all of that.
Yeah.
Um, but I give you big kudos, Chelsea, because you're creating this space through your work. You're contributing to your question is, how do we create this space? So I think, it takes people like you to create a safe environment to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I found myself in places where I felt always pulled, similar to you, in learning, okay, how do I communicate in the best way in this space when I didn't really see the best communication at home or
Mhm.
um I have so much more to my story. I think it's important for people to know a little bit about that, at least in the space. And an example of that for me is I always found myself kind of like just feeling really pulled and like having to hide parts of myself rather than embracing it. So I think throughout my career journey so far, that's what I've been seeing. And I want to know more. I want people to know that we are all people at the end of the day. We
Yeah,
have stories, we have, and that's how, and like that's what drives our impact. So thank you for, sharing that and your perspective and going and talking a little bit more about spirituality. I want to like shift a little bit. And for me, I think when I talk about spirituality, it's not based off religion, it's not based off anything like that. But I would love to know, has there been any moment in your life that you connect spiritually to the world? And how do you do that? And how has that helped you as a person in connecting in whatever way you do with the world?
I love that question. Well, I grew up, my dad's mom, Louisa, she was a devout Catholic. I mean, it was every day. She would go to church
I know. I have that in my family
every
too.
day with the little, scarf. And so, I think I have some of that because I loved her so much. I really did. And so, I went to catechism, I did the first communion. And it's an interesting question because I was just saying to myself a couple weeks ago, I told my mom, I said, Mom, we need to go to church on Saturdays. And the reason I like going to church is I like that I can go there and I feel like I relax. I feel like just everything kind of just calms down, you know, and if you were to say, what was the priest talking about? I'd be like, I'm really more taking that time to reflect. I'm using that downtime, that space to think about what's happening with me. How did this week go? Were there things that I think I could have done differently? Could I have been more patient with that person? Could I have been kinder with that person? Could I have been kinder to myself? You know, and so then I also use that time to kind of get ready for the next week.
Mhm.
Like, where do I want to feel stronger? Where do I want to, and it's interesting too, because the Lord's Prayer is like the Our Father, the typical Our Father that a lot of people know. Um, there's a line in there that talks about forgiving those who trespass against you. Well, I'm telling you, that comes in very handy.
That's like saying in a
There's,
real world way,
yes,
you got down.
because there are some people where I'm just, really frustrated with, but I have to remember, I have to forgive, um, so that, you know, so for me, that's sort of my spiritual, you know, way that I lean into spirituality is through church and using it to maybe that's part of my healing process. Maybe that's my therapy. Um, but I feel that's a good place for perspective, and that really does help me a lot. So I'll be there probably tomorrow. No, Saturday.
Okay, yes.
um, so you know that works for me.
Yeah, of course. And I think when I think about spirituality, it's almost as if you're giving your time space for reflection. You're giving yourself time to really think about the week or just how you're showing up as a person in a having this human experience. And what would you say that how how would this affect a leader who may not do that? Because in my experience in this world, I have seen a lot of leaders that are insightful, are reflective, are growing. And I have also noticed that there are leaders who say they're leaders, but there's that missing part. So I just want to know what's the, I guess, what do we need in this world to address kind of that? Like, the concept of leadership and being authentic, but also being grounded and reflective.
Yeah, uh, I was really interested in my younger days to climb the ladder. I mean, that was super important to me. And, I started out as an hourly employee, and then I got into that lead position. Then I got into that supervisor position. And I noticed that with each one of those promotions, my confidence would go up. Um, but you have to really watch yourself because you can start to believe in your own hype. So let me give you an example. I worked for a vice president, amazing man, and he saw how ambitious I was, and he said, and he got really quiet one day, and I just loved him so much. And I remember he was much older than me at the time. He's retired now. But when he spoke, he was kind of like Moses. He was a kind of when he spoke, you just stop and you listen. And he said, Anna, and I said, yes. He said, don't lose your identity within your title. It's okay. But I noticed that as I was continuing to climb, like to a director, to an admin director, you do start to adopt sort of a different persona. But I do also remember being a frontline worker. And I remember I was even though I was a high school dropout, I was a frontline worker. I was also a student.
Hmm.
What I was doing is observing how managers and experiencing how managers would make me feel. So, for example, some managers would treat me just by the title of my badge. Like I was only capable and competent to do that frontline job. And then there were some managers who genuinely said, well, what do you think? They weren't boxing me into a clerk or to a front desk person. And I always remember that. And I vowed to myself, if I ever become it, not if, when I become a director, I'm going to remember how I felt in some of those interactions. So I think, one of the things that I learned in being in leadership roles is once you're there, it's not about you. It's just not about you. You're already there. What it's about is how do you support and inspire those that work for you. There's a really great book, and I read it many years ago, but I never forgot the book. It's called The Leader Within You. And it talks about the different levels of leadership. the most, the first level is people do what you tell them to do because you simply have power. If I told you as a supervisor, Chelsea, I want you to go do that, you may not like me, you may not think it's a good idea, but I have power over you, and you got to do it. Why? You got to pay your rent, you got to pay babysitters or whatever you got to do. But the highest form of leadership is people want to work for you. They believe in you. They know that you believe in them. They know that you care about them. So that's, for me, leadership is probably managing other people, I think is one of the hardest things to do because, you are directly affecting the quality of life of other people. And if you don't respect that and handle that appropriately, you are affecting the life of other people who are caretakers, parents, people with issues or things that they deal with they don't even talk about in the workplace. So I'm very sensitive to leaders who are not doing the right things for their employees because it's such it's such a fragile role to be in. So I really, but we're all humans, we make mistakes, but at the end of the day, I think a leader's job is to care about the people they oversee and truly care about their success and truly care about the quality of their lives.
Wow. Yes. I'm like, I want to work for you. Because, I think just in my own personal experience in career and in this world, I can pinpoint those leaders who I knew cared. Like, though they stay with me. My first job out of college, my supervisor, she changed my life, and I hope she hears this. She did. I should tell her that.
Yes,
I,
tell her that.
I
Tell her.
will. I'm going to tell her. She changed my life because she showed me that she cared, and it was, yes, I respected her so much and I wanted to do right by her and the team. And she did it in a way where if she had to take on an extra task with me, she would do it. So I learned and I didn't continue making that mistake.
Yeah.
And, I made a lot of mistakes. um, but I think what she left with me is that she actually cared, and she showed me that she also was a human and a soul as well. And she saw me as one of those. And I think, as you said, a lot of times leaders get lost in the titles. They
Yeah,
get
they
lost in
do.
the climbing the ladder and um the
Yep.
importance, and I get that. That can happen. That can happen. And that's like ego. So
It's
it's like you
ego.
really have to like check your ego at lots of points of your life.
Yeah. What's kind of funny is, I tell people, I said, I have all of these, awards that you mentioned in the beginning, but I'm telling you, all I have to do is go to either Walmart or something and nobody cares.
Ooh.
Get in line just like everybody else. So, you've got to be careful with that, and it's interesting. I did a presentation at a university, and I had the slide of all the awards and recognitions, that I have a master's and I have all this stuff. The second slide, I had high school dropout, grew up in crime-ridden neighborhood, lacked confidence,
Mm,
because you gotta, I think that's where you get authentic, you
yes.
know, that's where all those awards are great, but in between all those awards were times feeling inadequate,
Mm-hmm.
times feeling like, am I really smart enough or not? I mean, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes that little voice that's sitting there that's challenging you, that little voice is, that's, gives you that feeling of being an imposter or all those things. But, I think that's what really helps is to, yes, I think you should be proud of your accomplishments, but, to also be vulnerable with people. And, I am, the high school piece, I never talked about that. And I didn't, I thought I was going to be judged. I thought I was going to be considered less than. And I remember I was invited to participate on an article in the New York Times for the 5-year anniversary of the book Lean In. And so I'm on the phone with the writer, and she's asking me a number of questions. And then she says, "So what high school did you graduate from?" I
Wow.
thought, oh, wow, there's the question. There's the question. This is a New York Times
It was
article.
going to come up
What
one
am I
day.
going to say? Right? What am I going to say? And I said, I'm a high school dropout. And what happened after that is that there were some people, young Latinas in particular, and Latinos who came across the article and said, thank you. Thank you for saying that, because sometimes I felt that I wasn't smart enough or good enough. But, one thing I'll kind of say about education, Chelsea, if I may, is, I got 2 degrees later in life. And after I got the master's degree, and yes, those credentials can help open doors. And it improved certain things that I was able to do. But I thought, isn't this interesting? I have a master's degree. And I went through years of college, working full time, by the way, raising my daughter, doing that. But you know what I said to myself? But none of that taught me how to treat people. That whole college experience did not teach me how to treat other people. It did not teach me how to navigate the work environment. It didn't teach me these things that are also important components to be effective in the workplace. So, as much as I appreciate a degree, what I don't ever want to do is ever look at somebody who doesn't have a degree, look at somebody with a degree and somehow say the person with a degree is more competent, is smarter, is as hard. That's where I think that's where there are flaws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was so authentic in your answer too. And like the authenticity behind our personal journeys. I think that's what we need more in the world. And I can really relate to you. I feel like I did everything with the degrees and going after so many accolades. And at the end of the day, those are important parts of me, but that's not how I want to be remembered. It's like being remembered by how you actually treat someone
Yes.
and how you impact other people's lives. Because once you're gone from this earth, other people are going to still have to go on with the world, and you want to be remembered that way. Like that's what I think, and that's personally something I want to be remembered by how I impacted everyone.
Right.
Even the person I'm walking down the street, hello, how are you?
Yes.
Doing that acknowledgement.
Yeah.
So I think with all of this, with the authenticity piece, what advice would you give to someone who might be struggling with being authentic or wanting to be a little bit more real with themselves? Maybe that's in the workplace, maybe that's just for themselves. What advice would you give someone who's listening today, right now, in this moment, on how to be more authentic and become the most authentic version of themselves?
Well, I think it's addressing any fears that you might have in being authentic. Like when I started Lean In Latinas, I didn't talk about it at work. I didn't want to be the girl waving my brown flag all over the organization. So let's think about that for a minute. Why? Why was I concerned about that? Did I have fear about what other people might think? I think it's interesting. As I've gotten older too, uh, you start to question, why does it matter so much to me what people think? Like, why is that weighing heavy on my mind? And it's interesting. My friend Jenny, who's actually co-founder of Lean In Latinas, Jenny Salinas, she wanted to go see Oprah.
Gosh,
And it was very
I
expensive.
saw Oprah.
Yes.
I did. It was the best moment of my life.
Yeah. She wanted to see her here in the Bay Area. And at first I didn't really want to spend the money that it would take. And so, but I went ahead and did it. And I'm glad I did because there was one piece in there where Oprah said, I interview some of the most powerful people in the world, presidents, dignitaries, celebrities. And what I find interesting about that most of the people, even President Obama, when we were done with the interview, leaned over to me and said, did I do okay? And so she said, we just want to feel validated. We
Mm.
just want validation in whatever it is that we do. So I thought, why am I afraid to bring certain things up? Why am I so worried about what other people are going to think? Why am I seeking so much outside validation?
Yeah.
That really should come from me.
Mm.
So when I started to change that narrative, I was like, yes, I am the founder of Lean In
Yes.
Latinas. That's what I do. Yes, I'm a high school dropout. So I think it's is to be comfortable in who you are, all parts and pieces, the good one parts and the not so great parts, because we all have those parts.
Mm.
Um, and maybe care a little less about what people are going to think, and believe in yourself more. And that took me a long time to get to that place. I was just so worried about what people are going to think and say that it held me back. And now, you know, I pretty much say what I'm going to say, and I feel more authentic with myself, which allows me then to be more authentic with other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. When you said talked about the, Obama piece saying, did I do okay? I'm like,
Yes, this
if
is the first
Obama is
time.
saying this, why isn't everyone doing all the things that they
We're all doing it. We're all doing it,
do?
right? We do it all
Oh,
the time.
yeah.
Here I am, founder, and I've had all these titles, and I'll do a presentation, and I hope I did okay. So it's that constant validation that you're seeking, either from externally or internally. But I think the more you give yourself grace, the more you know, not get hung up on a mistake, because we will always make some level of mistakes in our
Yeah.
lives, and not to beat yourself up over it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Um, okay. I want to get to Lean In Latinas. I
Okay.
think that because that definitely it has been changing so much of my life so far in the community that has been created.
Yeah.
And I want to know what was the motivation to start Lean In Latinas and be the founder? And also, what has been the impact so far since the inception of Lean In Latinas? And you can also talk all about it, what you do. I want to hear all about it.
Well, you know, I was always a little bit of a nerd, always looking for books for self-help tips in the workplace. I was constantly doing that. Um, Another book that I'll plug, it's a little bit dated. It's called Basic Black by Kathy Black. She was the editor of a number of magazines, Cosmopolitan, all these magazines. So in that same token, I picked up the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, and I thought, oh, there's a few little interesting pieces in there. I can do these. And then somehow I found out about what's called Lean In circles. There's about 90,000 plus of these circles around the globe. And she'll tell stories herself around, she had no idea that it would blow up the way it did. So I read the book, I found out about the circles, and I looked online. I said, oh, a lot of these circles are here in the Bay Area. But Chelsea, for whatever reason, I never joined one of them. I
Mm,
thought, oh, okay. But something kept pulling me back to the site. And one Sunday morning, this is about 7 years ago, with a cup of coffee in my hand, there I was in the chair going back to the website. And I saw this little button that said, create your own circle. And I thought, oh, okay. So I click on the button, and then this other screen comes up and it says, what do you want to name your circle? What's your mission and vision? And I thought, I don't know, and within 10 minutes or less, I don't know where it came from, Chelsea, I came up with Lean In Latinas. And I thought, there it is. That's why I never joined anything, because none of them spoke to me in the way I identify. And then I put in the mission and vision, hit enter, and I thought, I have no idea what I'm doing, but okay, let's see what happens. Within a couple days, I got a Latina who said, I'd like to join Lean In Latinas because I am a first generation college graduate Latina, and I want to be around other like-minded Latinas. A couple days later, another one said, I'm a Latina engineer in a primarily white male dominated environment, and I want to learn how to navigate this environment. The first meeting was me and 3 people who don't know me on a Saturday morning coming to my house. I could be a serial killer or something. And I was so fascinated by this. By this point, I was already a director, so I was a little bit savvy around, I need to really listen more than talk. And so I was really fascinated. I thought, why are they coming to my house? What are they hoping for? What are they looking for? Within 6 months, it was over 100 people. It just wouldn't stop. And believe it or not, we still have that today. Every week, request over request over request. Within about a year or so, I got contacted by the Lean In organization who said, we really like what we're seeing, because we use their platform as people join. And then I joined this very elite group of Lean In leaders from across the world, Asia and Paris and Canada. And I was just so intimidated by them, but inspired by them. And within that same time period, I found myself sitting in Sheryl Sandberg's house having dinner thinking, how did this high school dropout girl get here? Well, we'll flash forward to where we're at today. I couldn't be more happy to be among these amazing women. We're all volunteers. We're also a nonprofit organization. What started as a circle with 3 Latinas is now thousands of people across literally the world. We just started a group in Canada, Los Angeles, Houston. We have a pop-up event coming up in New York. So can you imagine? I sit here and think, this started in my backyard. And then we're really super excited. And you know about this, Chelsea, is that we have our annual conference coming up on August the 9th. And we feel super special that LinkedIn is hosting us. So, I really see Lean In Latinas as sort of that little cherry on top, because I want to leave a legacy. I wanted to create a community that I didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
So the last thing I'll share, about Lean In Latinas, because I could go on for hours about this, is there are 3 words that are very meaningful to us in Lean In Latinas. Those words are learn, share, and grow. I have learned in the years that I've been doing this that each member wants to learn something, whether it's how to negotiate better for more pay, how to have executive presence, how to interview better. They want to share amongst each other. So there's a common bond that brings them together. And it's just not Latinas. We're open to all women. We have men as well. We have allies. Our arms are open to everybody. So learn, share, and then finally the last word is grow. Each person wants to grow in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's all the extra hours I have at night, on the weekends, many times with toothpicks holding my eyelids open, but I am not going to stop until we see more representation of Latinas in the C-suite and the boardrooms, and we close the wage gap, which is about 45%, 47% for Latina women. We have Latina Equal Pay Day coming up soon. But I am not going to stop. I'm going to be talking about this when I'm in the convalescent home or wherever it is that I end up. But and I just want to give a shout out to there's probably close to 20 of us now that are running Lean In Latinas as volunteers.
Okay. whoever's hearing this right now, get on the website right now. Everything, I'll make sure we share all the resources
Thank
from.
you. Thank you. It's a lot of my heart is there. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And Lean In Latinas has given me space to really think about what I want to do in life and the impact that I want to leave, and just seeing and being around other women and Latinas who are doing it and passionate, that's like lighting me up again. And in moments where I'm like, I don't know if I should do this, or having not the confidence that I want, it's women that are part of Lean In Latinas that have
Thank
shown
you.
me that confidence.
Thank
And yes, and I think especially for whatever's happening in the world right now and my unraveling, this community has been super, super helpful. So thank you for sharing about Lean In Latinas. Thank you so much, Anna, for
You're welcome.
the work that you're doing and being authentic and sharing your truth, because like I always say, whoever's listening, there's going to be something in this podcast and in this conversation that will resonate with someone.
Yeah.
And that's going to be their sparkle, that's going to be their light. And this is why I wanted to have these conversations, and I want to keep having more. But one last thing is, if you could just, whoever just listened to this podcast, if you could just share maybe one sentence, a quote, or anything for them to just hold on to and maybe like write down, what would that be?
Don't be so hard on yourself.
Don't be so hard on yourself. I love that. We're all unraveling, everyone. Um, yeah, well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. And I know that today's conversation is going to touch many, many lives.
Thank you. And I want to say thank you to you, Chelsea. I love the work that you're doing, and I love that you are extending your heart to other people.
Thank you.